We really just have one item to be heard. Now we have one public comment card. Item 1 is a receive and file item. That will be my recommendation. And then on items 2, 3, 4, and 6, those are consent items. Hearing no objection, I would recommend that we support those items.
Councilmember, would you like me to read those items into the record?
Should you?
Sure.
Absolutely. That was exactly what I was thinking.
Okay. Item number 1, communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Ms. Evangeline Ordaz Molina to the Affordable Housing Commission for the term ending June 30th, 2017. Item number 3, CDD report and CAO report relative to the status of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Sustainable Communities Challenge Grant, authorization to negotiate and execute agreements on a sole source basis with subcontractors for the Northeast Los Angeles Collaborative Partners and related actions. Item number 4 is motion Reyes-Labange relative to authorizing the controller to establish new accounts and to make appropriations with the Community Challenge Grant Fund to complete the Gila Riverfront Vision Plan. And item number 6, communication from the mayor and CAO report relative to retroactive acceptance of a grant award in the amount of $1.5 million from the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention for the period of October 1st, 2012 through September 30th, 2015 in support of the 2012 PBFX K003 Community-Based Violence Prevention Demonstration Program and authority to negotiate and execute the related grant agreements and related actions.
Excellent. Okay, those matters will be.
And Councilmember, it's our understanding that the CAO report for item number 3 incorporates the recommendations in item number 4. So it would be our recommendation to go ahead and receive and file the motion Reyes-Labange for item number 4.
Item number 3 or 4?
Well, item number 3, the CAO report addresses the recommendations in item number 4. So we recommend to go ahead and receive and file the motion item number 4, in as much as it's addressed in the CAO report for item number 3. They're both related to one another.
Okay. Okay, that's no problem. Okay, as recommended. And then item number 5 is regarding the sequestration issue, so we want to hear a report.
Sure. Item number 5, Federal Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles report relative to the impacts of federal sequestration on HACLA and its residents it serves.
Great. Wow. Oh. Okay.
Good morning, Councilman. It's good to be back in front of your committee once again. Yes, it is, actually. But not with the news that we do have to report out today. I believe this is really in response to the letter I sent to members of City Council dated February 22nd, which was to inform the Council of the pending sequestration, other sort of budgetary cuts that HACLA was looking at, and the impacts that we expect that to have on our ability to deliver services to some of the poorest residents here in the City of Los Angeles. So there were really 2 budget actions that affect us in different ways, but both of them very significantly. The first one has to do with actually our annual budget. And it's a little complicated, so please stay with me on this. In 2012, housing authorities throughout the country were dramatically underfunded, both for their public housing programs as well as for their Section 8 programs. And there was a one-time fix to those budgets where HUD actually swept reserves out of public housing authority reserves around the country, and the same with the Section 8 program. So the actual new budget authority in 2012 was dramatically less than what it takes to run those programs. That was done knowingly by Congress with the anticipation that in 2013, that so-called budget anomaly would be fixed and those programs would be made whole with full funding. The problem is that we got caught up with this continuing resolution for our 2013 budget, which is the budget year we're currently in, and there's no fix to that budget in sight, and therefore both public housing Section 8 are significantly underfunded, and that's particularly true when it comes to the operational side of things. We've been operating with kind of an ever-changing landscape as to what our administrative resources are going to be. And to give you an example of that, in January and February of this year, HUD informed us that we would be funded at 92% of our administrative costs for the public housing program. We were just informed 2 weeks ago that will drop to 80% of what our budget is supposed to be for the month of March. And with sequestration in place, that's expected to drop even further down to approximately 74% of what our operating budget is supposed to be funded at. Section 8 is even more dramatic. We've been significantly underfunded on our administrative side for the last 3 years. We went into the year assuming we would be funded at an 80% of what our administrative fees were supposed to be. We were informed in January that would be 75%. The next week, we were told it's 74.5%. With sequestration in place, that drops all the way down to about 64%. And so you can see there's a significant underfunding of our ability to...
And that's on a daily basis.
This is changing. It's changed about 4 times since the start of the year, and yet we're in the middle of our budget year trying to figure out how we staff and how we plan to run these operations. So it's been...
But you're saying it's a did I hear you say a 20% difference?
Well, it's dropped from our budget we put into place was at 80% of what our projected fees would be, and now we were just informed within the last 10 days or so with sequestration, which I'll explain in a moment, it drops down to 64.5%, I believe, is the current projected fee that we can anticipate receiving over the balance of this year.
But the difficulty is you don't know how long sequestration is going to last.
We don't know, but it is what it is, effective Friday, and we have to start preparing for it. To interpret all those numbers, right now we're looking at a $9.9 million cut in our operating budget for this year under the circumstances as they are today. Mm-hmm. And that's something we've got to deal with, just the balance of our current budget year that we're already in.
Is there any discussion that as part of the resolution, they retroactively fund these projects?
Well, there is discussion underway right now this week. As I understand it, the Republicans have come forward in the House with a continuing resolution. The current continuing resolution for budget authority for the whole federal government expires March 27th. And without some extension of that, all federal government programs do shut down. So the House has put forth just this week a bill that would provide continuing resolution under the budget levels of the sequestration and provide more flexibility to the military.
Under the continuing sequestration funding levels?
It would be a continuing resolution at the levels of sequestration that were just put in place this last Friday, as I understand it.
What's the point of that? I mean, isn't that already...
It's to provide greater flexibility. Sequestration, as is currently in effect today and under the law, is very rigid, so it's across the board.
So line item by line item?
Line item by line item cuts.
So this would give departments the ability to move money within their budgets?
The Republican proposal, as I understand it, would give the military the ability to move money around within its budget. However, it would not provide that sort of flexibility within the non-discretionary domestic programs. The Senate, on the other hand, is putting up a bill right now that, as I understand it, and this just happened even last night, everything is changing, which would provide greater flexibility. It would also restore some of the funding anomalies, the budget anomalies we're talking about, at least partially restore those in our HUD programs, but that's on the Senate Democratic
budget
side.
Anomaly?
A budget anomaly is what I was suggesting in 2012 is a one-time hole that was fixed by sweeping reserves from other programs. They call that an anomaly to the budget. You can only use it 1 year. And that's what needs to be fixed, to address operational needs and housing
Are
authorities
they
throughout the
focusing
country.
more on the continuing resolutions or on just solving this problem?
Well, I should explain the other part of this budget issue, and that's sequestration, because sequestration not only, has further cutbacks on the operational side.
Could you do me a favor? This sounds naive, but I think, where does the term sequestration come from? What does that mean? I mean, I'm just curious. What the heck does it mean?
I was hoping
It
you could
sounds like
explain that to me.
you sequester a jury. I don't. What does it mean?
Well, I believe sequestration was a term they came up with back in the 1980s as part of Graham-Rudman Act, and it was a way of right up front putting a law in place that would freeze funding if certain things didn't happen at a future date. It's something to that effect. So it's a term.
I don't even. What does sequestration mean in that context? I don't get it.
Well, in this particular case, what sequestration means is that because the federal government was unable to approve budgets for this year, they had a trigger date that as of a certain date, there would be X amount of cuts across the board to all government programs with some exclusions to that.
So it's sort of like you're holding everything hostage.
You're holding everything
until we come up with
hostage
a better
until we
decision.
can come to some compromise on a
Okay.
budget deal.
I guess there's some logic there.
So if I could quickly talk about, because this is important too, I've talked about operations where everybody around the country in public housing is getting hit very hard. On the program side, for the first time, we're going to see very significant impacts, in particular with the Section 8 program. We're the largest provider, the second largest provider.
Before you go there, can I ask a question about, are you being directed to take certain actions?
I've got an emergency board meeting here at 10 o'clock this morning that I'm gonna-
So that's the board, but are you being directed by Washington to take certain actions?
It's pretty much up to us. We're being directed as to what our budget is.
So
and we have to live within our budget.
you have to decide whether or not to gamble that they're going to solve this thing, and then you have to determine whether or not you gamble
Exactly.
that they are going to
And-
retroactively fill the gap, or
Exactly.
or whether you.
HUD has been optimistic up until the sequestration that they were going to fix the budget. That's why they front-end funded some of the operational
Okay,
expenses.
Do you have any, or can you tell us what position the board is likely to take with regard to risk, whether they're willing to gamble that they're going to solve the sequestration problem, whether they're going to have an extended
Well, we've already taken certain steps. For instance, we've offered an early retirement program incentives which expired last Friday, so we...
So there are some benefits to this sequestration.
Well,
in other words, you might have wanted to reduce your staff in any case, but this gives you an opportunity to
Well,
do
no, we
that.
didn't want to reduce our staff at all. If we were fully funded, we would make no reductions in staff. As a matter of fact, we're understaffed, even on last year's budget.
Well, I understand that, but I'm saying that this might give you an opportunity to move people off the payroll that are on the high end.
Well, we're taking a series of steps. We've gone back through all of our budget line items, and we've reduced that as much as we can. We've been in discussions with the unions of moving to furloughs as early as this month, and we're going to the board this morning, and we don't have the agreement of all the unions, and we're looking for a declaration of fiscal emergency, which allows us to take further steps. We offered early retirement as a way of trying to save some positions. And
How quickly would the federal government move to declare a fiscal emergency?
Well, this would be our declaration, and it's based upon really the trigger of the sequestration, which is now officially in effect as of last Friday.
Okay.
So with that action, we feel we have to take significant actions now.
So you feel you have the authority to do that now?
Yes, we need the authority to do it now. And in particular, if we're going to move forward with furloughs without sign-off of all the unions that we have, but we would need
If
that.
this is this being done, I'm sure you're communicating with your colleagues in various parts of the country. And,
Yes.
Is this sort of a strategic effort to send a message to Washington?
No, it's a strategic effort to manage the programs under what we see as our budget to the best of our ability, and this is happening throughout the country. I think Los Angeles happens to be probably in better shape than many authorities throughout the country, just because we have such a large-scale program, and therefore resources and some degree of flexibility to go with that. The smaller authorities are going to get hit even harder, and there's already some evidence that some smaller authorities aren't going to be able to continue in their administration of the Section 8 program.
Okay, so you were going to begin to tell us what the specific ramifications could be.
On the program side, in particular, with Section 8 gets hit very hard. For the first time that I'm aware of since the program's been in effect, there's across-the-board cut in the actual subsidies that are being provided through Section 8.
So could you describe that to me?
Yes,
I saw
under
that in the notes, but I want to, for dollars, so somebody paying how much would have to pay how much?
well, as an example, and I've got Peter Lynn here, who's our director of the Section 8 program, along with Eric Brown, who's head of intergovernmental affairs. Section 8 pays the difference between somebody's 30% of somebody's income, their ability to pay, and what the established rent is. Section 8 pays the difference in the way of subsidies. So if the rent were $1,000, someone could afford $200. Section 8 is paying the $800 difference to allow them to live in that individual unit under the Section 8 tenant-based voucher program. There are a whole slew of different types of specific programs we run under Section 8, but the tenant-based voucher program is the core program that we have a total, as an example, we have total Section 8 payments that come through HACLA that total just in excess of $500 million a year. So it's a significant
That
amount.
$1,000 example, what would they have to pay now?
Well,
And this is retroactive to, what, Friday or?
this is something we would have to roll out quickly to realize, to be able to absorb the cuts. And maybe, Peter, I can have you address very briefly what our plan is and the impacts it would have.
So in the example that was just described, let's say that the $1,000 represented the maximum rent that we would pay, which is called our voucher payment standard. We would have to take the action of reducing that maximum rent down to, say, $900. At that level, the individual household would pick up the difference, that extra $100. So their rent would increase by 50%. Their share of their rent would go from $200 to $300. That's not a tenable situation for most families, obviously. So,
But I understand many of the families, well, the numbers I'm looking at show that in the city of Los Angeles, there are almost 40,000 Section 8 families.
in that main tenant-based voucher program, so about
And then
42,000 there.
of those,
other programs.
14,465 would be affected. That would describe the difference between those that are affected and those that aren't.
Right. So not everyone is at the maximum rent. So some folks have been able to rent at units that are below that maximum rent.
So they'll be okay.
They've been in units for a long time,
If
for
it's
example.
less than
they're-
900, they'll be okay.
They would be okay, that's
Okay.
correct. So they would not be impacted.
Okay.
The rest of them, we would work to...
So these would be primarily, I have to assume, I shouldn't assume anything actually, because I'm looking at the numbers of people that would be affected, and the bulk of them are in CD 8
That's correct,
and CD 10.
that's correct. Is it-
I would think that those that are paying higher rents would be affected the most.
That's correct.
So I'm surprised that it's the Booker and CD 8 and CD 10. Are they paying higher rent over there or
It's just that the density is higher.
lower income?
There are more folks. in
Oh,
that-
so it's based on their income and so.
It's based,
Okay, I get it, okay. Thank you. I don't know who yelled that out. Oh, is that Sachs? Thank you. Okay. in terms of public housing, it's actually CD14 and CD15 that are...
The impact on public housing has more to do with our cuts in operational expenses, so that will just affect...
What were the cuts again?
Well, in public housing, we started the year...
So
again,
starting the year at 100%,
At
it's like a
92%.
36% reduction?
well, 92% dropping to less than 80%.
Right.
So, again, that means that we're going to have fewer managers on site, we'll have fewer public services that we can be providing.
Do you have any reserve accounts?
We do have reserve accounts, and we're actually, as part of all this, spending some of the reserves right now. As you mentioned, in January, we're dealing with these
When you
uncertainties.
say suspending, you mean using them?
Expending.
Oh, expending. okay.
Expending some of our reserves right now as we're transitioning to some sort of stabilized budget. So we know we're already over budget. We're picking that up with some of the reserves that we have. You can't sustain that over a long period of time, but we are spending some of our reserves right now during all of
Well,
these
this is,
uncertainties.
it seems to me the worst possible scenario, it isn't so much the cuts as it is the inability to make decisions, because you have no idea how long this thing is going to last.
Well, it's both. We're prepared right now. We haven't taken dramatic steps yet with regards to our staffing. We've done what we can to prepare for this. We've been waiting for the budget resolution. Well, March 27th, something has to happen or the whole federal government shuts down. So we're trying to target things for that date, and I think once we get a little more clarity, hopefully around that date, then we're prepared to start responding to the cuts in the Section 8 program and going out programmatically, and we're prepared to move much more aggressively with regards to staffing issues
so-
at the Housing Authority.
So tell me, I've got San Fernando Gardens in my district, and a small number of other Section 8, actually 3% of the total. A lot of these people aren't going to be able to afford it. So what happens?
Well, I think as Peter was starting to explain, that's just it. Either landlords are going to have to be willing to do something to reduce
the
their
cut.
rents,
Okay.
or tenants are going to have to come up with more money that they probably don't have, or they're going to have to move and find a different home to move into that has lower rents. Those are really the options, and we're talking again up to 15,000, almost 15,000 families that are going to be affected by that under the current budget that's in place.
And
that would be significant because what it will tend to do is it's going to push some people out of housing altogether.
yeah.
And, we've made, I think, significant strides in attempting to address the issues of homelessness here in Los Angeles. We've put a lot of resources and efforts into it. We've worked closely with the county, with Department of Mental Health Services. We're doing a lot on that front, and this is only going to exacerbate that problem.
Not to mention the economy, because the apartment owners are now going to have higher vacancy rates.
So this is the most dramatic thing to happen in the field of public housing, Section 8 housing, since the inception of the program. We're being funded at the lowest administrative level in the history of public housing and in the history of Section 8 right now. And we're looking at, for the first time in its history, significant cutbacks in existing resources, existing subsidies.
And is the housing department here? The housing department is not here? Is there any effort to, are you working with our housing department in terms of those impacts?
Yes, we are working with the housing department. We continue to work with them, particularly on going out with notice of fund availability on permanent supportive housing, and we've been providing significant resources over the last 3 to 4 years on that front. We'll continue to do that.
Well, so today at the board, what kinds of things will be, do you have any specific recommendations to the board?
No, we're asking for the board at this emergency meeting to declare a fiscal emergency. That gives me more authority to implement some of these administrative decisions that we need to make, in particular with regards to furloughs. It's one of the multiple steps.
So that flexibility is relative to the administrative issues, or is
Yes.
it relative to the programmatic as well?
No, it's particularly relative to the administrative issues. We won't move on the programmatic issues. We have to prepare for it now, but we intend to move the end of this month unless something changes in the next couple
So
of
you got
weeks.
your fingers crossed that the federal government's going to get something going?
We've
before
got
the
to
end
do
of-
something in the next couple of weeks, or we've got to roll out the program with the money that we have to work with.
Well, I think everybody believes that there's going to be some kind of resolution sometime, but nobody can put a date on when that's going to be, so that makes it impossible for you to calculate your budgets.
It sure has felt that way.
And so it's going to cause incredible harm to the employees who might be furloughed and/or laid off, and the budgets could be replenished, and this whole shenanigans is unnecessary. That's, I think, the saddest thing. What kinds of assistance can the city lend?
Well, I think the reason I sent the letter out was to keep the city informed. We worked with the CAO's office back at the beginning of the year, and the January 3rd report they put out when the fiscal cliff was supposed to start January 1st had information from us as the impacts that we saw. So we want to keep the city informed. We're going to be working very closely with the advocacy groups to keep them informed of what we think the impacts of this are. We're going to reach out to the apartment associations as well, and so that they know what's going on and hopefully are prepared to understand it better and provide some form of support to the tenants that they already have in place.
Okay, now, with regard to the private sector, Section 8 vouchers are probably going to have a more subtle effect, but I'm concerned about the housing projects, and if a huge number of residents get an increase in their rent, I'd be very concerned about what might happen. What are we doing to work with those programs so that we don't?
Well, there is
Turn 'em
another
up.
impact we haven't gotten to yet as well that HUD has issued no direction on this, and that has to do, we administer, for instance, 45,000 additional units. We administer on behalf of HUD the Section 8 contracts there. So these are project-based contracts for apartments throughout Los Angeles, and we administer that for all of Southern California. That has also seen its budget reduced. So the question is HUD going to have us administer reduced payments to the owners of those properties?
Well, that's not my question. I understand that, but I'm talking about public safety.
About public
I'm talking,
safety.
if you have 1,000 people at Jordan Downs that are going to
Yes.
have an increase in rent, I'm concerned about what might happen.
Well, it's not going to affect
So
the
I'm wondering
increase.
what we're doing to coordinate to ensure that people are well-informed and prepared for these kinds of dramatic
It's not going to increase the rent for public housing residents. What
Okay.
it will do is decrease our ability to provide the services, provide the level of maintenance, to do the work orders on time, to do the landscaping, the gardening, all the things we do to properly manage these
And
properties.
LAPD is now your service provider, correct?
No, LAPD, we've got a program with them called the Community Safety Partnership Program in 4 of our projects, and that program will continue.
Okay, but I really think it's important for you to work with them.
Oh, absolutely, and I met with Chief Beck last week. I was
Okay.
with Captain Tingrides and Sergeant Tingrides on the program last night. So we work hand in hand with them.
Okay, and with regard to sequestration, is there anything we can do as a city?
Well, we've been on a couple of national calls, and they end each call with write a letter to your member of Congress, which isn't very helpful, because we've been meeting with all of our legislative delegation. I will be in Washington, D.C. next week, meeting with both senators as well as the congressional delegation. Everybody's feeling the heat. We just haven't nationally been able to come up with some sort of resolution of these never-ending budget crises. They're now starting to take their toll.
Okay. Well, thank you. Hang in there. Good luck. We will, I hope we can come back with a more positive report in maybe you can visit us again in 2 weeks, and we can see how things are going, because I think this is an urgent situation. I'm wondering whether we should have a hearing in City Council as well, just to allow you to, and the various impacted departments should probably make presentations with regard to sequestration. We are going to be out of session. Ironically, the City Council is going to Washington, for the National League of Cities. I think it's a great time for the National League to impact on Congress the dramatic cuts. We will be coming back on Friday, so perhaps we can certainly want to pass your letter on to all the council members as they go to Washington. Maybe I can put together a letter urging the council members who are going to Washington to focus on this issue as they meet with the various delegations. And hopefully the National League will have some impact on sequestration just by virtue of the fact that they're there in the coming days. But other than that, I think, unfortunately, I wish we could have had something scheduled for council today. And I'm wondering how to do this. Theoretically, we could have a Rule 23 motion introduced and have a presentation. Would somebody be available to make a brief presentation? I know you're running
Yeah, I
away.
need to get to my board meeting here
Yeah.
in 15 minutes, but I'd be happy to come back after that's done if
How long
council...
would that, this could be a long one.
Well, I hope it'll be a short one, but it all depends on the public comment. We only have one
Like
action
I said, it could be a long one.
You never know.
Yeah, well, if you can come back, let me see if we can scramble to put something together so that we could get a presentation. I think it's critical for my colleagues, particularly those who are going to Washington, to have this uppermost on their minds as they're going to D.C. and to have at least a more consistent message. So if you could be thinking in terms of a presentation that, and certainly not just relative to HACLA, but given your experience with the federal government, perhaps you can give us some guidance as to what messages we should convey to DC as we bounce from office to office.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. And
Okay, so please stay in touch. We'll figure out how to
Stay in
coordinate
touch.
that, and if you can't make it, then maybe somebody else can come and just speak on your behalf, but I think it's important for the council to hear that.
Okay, will do.
Thank you very much. And if not, then certainly when we come back, perhaps on the following Friday, when everybody comes back from DC, we'll actually have a more engaging discussion. But hopefully sequestration will be resolved by then. I don't see a lot of hope in the audience here. But, okay, thank you very much. We do have some public comment cards. Let me start with Ruth Schwartz.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that was a great presentation from the Housing Authority. I'm so glad they brought it up, and I'm so glad that you want to move this on to council, because I think this is the first of many negative impacts we're going to see on sequestration, and probably the worst, I have to say, because this is a totally federally funded program, and so many people receive Section 8. As Mr. Guthrie said, the HACLA Section 8 program has helped thousands of people since 1990. Those are the people that are at greatest risk with these rent increases as far as being able to accommodate them. So as a community, and I think with the leadership of you, Councilman Alarcon, and others, we really need to come together to come up with creative solutions. What are we going to do? Not many people who were previously homeless can afford a $200 increase, and some of the people affected will have that. they won't be able to move, the landlord won't reduce the rent, or maybe you can talk to the apartment owners and maybe, have some sway in that, but many won't, and many will become homeless again. So really, our most effective program over the last 20 years to solve homelessness is on the cutting board. And I think that the biggest impact is on that Section 8 program. That's where we need to focus our attention. That's where we're going to see the impact on very vulnerable, very poor people. I mean, our average median income is about 17% in Section 8. We're very poor people. This is not a working, some people work, but they work at minimum wage. It's a very poor person's program. So anything we can do to support the council to get this on the agenda, and create solutions, we'd like to be your partner in that from Shelter Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Arnold Sachs?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Councilman Alarcon. I couldn't miss shouting that answer out, by the way.
Pardon me?
About the lower income for the difference. My question, or my concerns are, the gentleman was speaking, and basically the beginning part of his conversation dealt with the HACLA administrative costs. He mentioned operational expenses, the fact that it front-ended loaded operational expenses. Did they front-end load any of the Section 8 funding for the residents to be served, or just deal with front-end loading operational expenses?
I don't think he front-loaded anything.
They mentioned front-end loading operational expenses as part of his budget.
No, he said he cut his budget, Arnold.
No, if you listen to the tape, he mentioned front-end loading.
I'm not going to listen to the tape.
Okay. They talked about furloughing employees, or this is not a city agency. It's not under the auspices of the city charter.
Not yet.
Okay, not yet.
It is under the city charter to the extent that we make the appointments, and we do have...
City employees?
Yes, but we do not have authority to make management decisions.
Okay. Are there any funded unfilled positions in HACLA, as there want to be in the city council, the city of LA's budget, and the county of LA's budget? Seems to be a lot of, you hear in budget discussions, a time to eliminate unfilled budgeted positions. And if they have unfilled budgeted positions and they're thinking of furloughs, that's train going in two different directions. He mentioned the Section 8 ceiling. Is it possible to change that ceiling? He mentioned if it was $100, like $1,000, that people would be affected under, that it would affect people under $1,000 less than people over $1,000. They're $100. Is it possible to change the effect of that ceiling so that instead of a $100 increase, which means the person's paying a 50% increase in their rent, it's spread out so that it's like a 35% increase or a 25% increase. You have low-income people moving to lower-income people. You're going to be moving low-income people out into a lower-income housing. Affecting the landlords, there's already a situation of not enough affordable housing in the first place. So people who were moved out of Section 8 programming, they might have their places backfilled in, and then those places will no longer be available for Section 8 programming if there's a fixture. And so you'll be looking for Section 8 housing and dealing with landlords who don't have Section 8 housing.
Yeah, I think that the department is keenly aware of the impacts, and one of the considerations, now the federal government know that you cannot change the ceiling that is directed by the federal government. However, that's why I asked the question about their reserve situation. To what extent can they use reserves to cover some of the shortfalls relative to sequestration? But they've been very secretive about their reserves at HACLA, and since we don't have authority to delve into their budget with great clarity, we don't know there are. Now, if they can identify other alternative revenue streams, then they can make a local policy decision to reduce the negative impact on those tenants. But those are decisions that, those are things that have to be ferreted out, and
But-
hopefully we don't have to even get into those discussions.
In the years that HACLA has been in existence, if that's been the situation, and the fact that the budgets and the recession and everything that's hit the city of LA, do you think it would be about time to address that situation where the city has an opportunity to see where money is being spent?
Well, I've always been in favor of the city of Los Angeles taking control of HACLA. So I'm not, the city used to have much more authority with regard to the management of HACLA, but we forgave that back in the day. I don't remember when, but it was a long time ago, and they are essentially a quasi-independent organization, with the exception of the extent that we appoint their board of directors. And so it's kind of, I don't know why we even have this set up. Why would we be in the position of appointing directors when we have no accountability over them? And so it's very frustrating for me, but I believe we should have the opportunity to consider taking over HACLA. But remember, if we don't know what their numbers are, and if we did an audit and we found out that they're actually in debt and in bad situation, then we may be taking on their bad debt, and that might not be a good situation for the city of Los Angeles. But in any case, I do believe that there is there's a couple of things that you touched on, and I think they're very important. Because HACLA is not a high-profile agency in the city of Los Angeles with regard to the general public is not scrutinizing what they do. And that's part of the problem. So you have a few advocacy organizations that mau the process and get some attention. But the city of Los Angeles, should it have control of HACLA, would provide a bright light, because more people follow city government than follow HACLA. So that's one reason why I think it's important for us to consider taking HACLA over. The other thing has to do with getting the information. We have a difficult time getting the information. But in this particular case, we have to work very closely with HACLA to reduce the negative impacts, because whatever they do could cause havoc in our streets. And so
Basically, you have no idea what their budget is, so they're in the driver's seat no matter who you put in.
we have a general idea what their budget is, but we don't have control of it. And so what my primary concern is number one, to ensure that the people that will be negatively impacted by the sequestration are fully aware of their situation and are prepared to the extent possible to deal with it. We do not need more people just walking out of their apartments and living on the streets. That would have a severe impact, and that's why I think it's so important for us to have a report to the city council, so that the city council understands what's going on.
It's
So with that, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
We got to get to city council, but I want to ask the city clerk, there's a couple of directions we can go here, but my intent is yes, to get a report back. So I do want to keep this item in the committee. Yes, 2 weeks, unless we conduct a special meeting, which we could theoretically do. And then number two, so we'll keep it for 2 weeks, but I may take the liberty of calling a special meeting on this. And then number two, I want to explore introducing a Rule 23 motion to properly inform the city council about what is going on, so that they can go to Washington with a more appropriate message.
Sure, and Councilmember, just to clarify, so item number 5 is the HACLA report back, not item number 2.
Okay.
And you want that one to go potentially Rule 23 today for City Council?
Well, that's the thing. If we wanted to come back to this committee, unless we got it kicked back, could the council kick it back? I see no reason why Mr. Wesson would not just, I just want to send it to council for the purposes of giving them information and then getting it back so that we can continue the discussion.
Yeah, you can take...
You know what, why don't we do a separate motion? Okay, so we'll keep this item in this committee, and then I'll do a separate motion, Rule 23, to get information about sequestration, and we can try to get some of the other departments also to weigh in. Okay, thank you very much. So this matter will be held in committee, and it will be my intent to introduce a Rule 23 motion. I'll work with the city attorney in council today. So with that, I think...
Councilmember, we still have item number 2 on the table.
Oh,
2 was approved.
that was...
Two was
part of the
approved? I'm sorry.
Actions, yeah.
And just to recap,
Did you say what it was?
I don't think I read item number 2. Just to be safe, I can go ahead and read it into the record.
Right.
Okay. Item number 2, CDD report and CAO report relative to the 2013 Community Services Block Grant Award and related actions. And just to recap, so for item number 1, we're going ahead and receive and file it. Item number 2, we're going to adopt the CAO report, and these are all communications as a chair. Item number 3, we will be adopting the CAO report. Item number 4, we'll be receiving and filing the motion Reyes-Labange. Item number 5, we'll be holding in, that's the HACLA sequestration item, we'll be holding in committee for 2 weeks. And item number 6, we are adopting the CAO report.
Exactly. Thank you. Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.